Hey guys, in this video I'm going to review the gscart SW, the 8 input 2 output SCART switch by gRetroStuff. And you might be wondering why I'm reviewing a switch, because on the face of it it seems like a very unexciting, thing to talk about and make a video about. But you'd be surprised. Unfortunately, right now, good SCART switches are very hard to come by, especially outside of Europe where SCART was, an actual thing outside of this retro niche that we're all trapped in. So that's one thing. The second thing is that, and the most controversial part about this product is that it costs 225 US dollars plus shipping. So with that kind of price tag, obviously some people want to know more, as to whether they should spend money on this thing or not. So I feel like that's something I could offer you guys. I was very excited about this. So, in case you don't know anything about SCART switches and the SCART connector type in general, I'd recommend going to retrorgb.com, or if you don't feel like reading anything, you can go to the My Life in Gaming YouTube page. They're a very good and entertaining and resource for RGB in general and SCART and great production values. So I recommend those. And in this video, I'm going to go over what the gscart SW comes with, the components of the gscart. I'm going to go over my setup and then test it, and finally give my own thoughts and evaluate whether or not it's worth the money. So that'll be interesting. But with all that being said, let's get on with the video. Some cool things they included are these regional adapters. So regardless of where you're from, you'll be good to go as far as the AC adapters go. That's all they've included, pretty much just the AC adapter and the gscart itself, plus these adapters. Just the essentials. Alright, so let's take a look at the gscart itself. As you can see, it's an acrylic see-through case, which is really nice because you can kind of take a look at all the components right off the bat. It's a nice touch. Also, it's cheap, I'm assuming. But yeah, as you can see, there are 8 SCART ports, which to my knowledge is the most for any single SCART switch. I could be wrong there, at least consumer level. Here is a SCART output. So basically, since it doesn't come with a male-to-male SCART cable, you'll have to order one, and by doing that, you can use this on an XRGB Mini, sorry, a BVM or a PVM if that's what you use. And if you're in Europe, you can use it on a CRT, since European CRTs, I guess, have a SCART option on them, or at least some of them do. So yeah, that's pretty basic in what you'd expect from a switch like this. Looking at the other components, here's the green LED light, just a power indicator. Here is the AC adapter port, pretty self-explanatory. Here is the 3.5 millimeter audio jack, which I'll get to in a second. And you're going to need that if you use this output option, which is the HD15, or VGA output. And this is what I use personally. I use a BNC to HD15 adapter on my BVM. And the one drawback of using this port is that it doesn't carry audio to the source. So you're going to have to use this 3.5 millimeter jack to carry the audio, or to send the audio rather. And I'll show you guys what my solution is and how I deal with it when I show my setup later. The nice thing about having two different output solutions is that, so here's my scenario. I'm going to be using the HD15 port to play on my BVM, but I'm also going to eventually use the SCART output as well, so I can record footage, and also once I get an upscaler, I'll be able to simultaneously play, on my HD TV while also having the option to play on my BVM without changing anything or having to change anything, which is really nice because you want to use different monitors for different purposes. Like, for example, maybe I want to use a BVM to play Battletoads on the NES because there's no lag, and it's a small game anyway, a 2D game. So, but what if I want to, play Mario Kart 64 or Smash Brothers with 4 people? Obviously, you don't want 4 people, huddling around a 20-inch, BVM. So, playing on an HD TV is a much better option there. So, it gives you more flexibility to have 2 outputs. I was really happy to see that feature included. And finally, you have these 2 switches right here. I haven't really fiddled with them. It's basically just about whether you want to switch on or off the C sync or H sync. Also, the just having a sync stripper, which is built in, you can turn that off as well. But I haven't done those, so it's pretty irrelevant for me. But it's nice that it's there, I suppose. All right, so here's a snapshot of my modest little RGB setup. Here's the monitor, the Sony BVM, and here are the speakers. They're just PC speakers because the Sony BVM doesn't have any internal speakers of its own, so I just go with PC speakers. And here's the gSCART. It only has 6 inputs at the moment, though there's a 7-slot reserved for the Neo Geo once I get one, but unfortunately they're very expensive, so could be a year, decade before I get one. And here's the shelf where I put all my consoles. It's a pretty shabby shelf, admittedly. But I get really happy when I look at it just because there's so many great consoles on this little thing. So that helps distract from the overall shabbiness of the setup. Okay, so here I'm going to show you how my gSCART is set up. And hopefully this won't be a complete disaster and you'll actually be able to see what I'm talking about. So here are the BNC to HD15 cables I was talking about earlier. Basically what you do is you just put them into the RGB BNC ports on your BVM or PVM or whatever you use. So here's the green, the blue, red, and sync in that order. And you just go directly into the gSCART, the VGA port, or the HD15 port, whatever you want to call it. Hopefully you can see that there. And like I said, the HD15 port doesn't carry sound, so you're going to have to use a 3.5 millimeter solution, which I'm going to show you in a second. So here's my audio solution. I turned the speaker around so you could easily see my setup. So I have these 2 RCA speakers, the white and red cables, and I have it going directly into this 3.5 millimeter port into the gSCART. So if depending on what your speaker uses, so you want to get a 3.5 millimeter cable that goes into whatever your speaker has. And I also have an additional set of cables. I have these set of RCA cables going into the NES. This specific model is called the Analog NT. Unfortunately, the Analog NT uses a VGA-like connector that doesn't send audio through the SCART cable, unlike every other system, basically. So you have to use the separate RCA port on the system. So just wanted to show that to you guys as well. All right, so let's get to the fun part. I'm going to test out the gSCART itself, and hopefully you'll get a sense of the video quality and the automatic switching capabilities of the gSCART in this segment. And I have all the controllers set up right there, ready to go. So first we're going to start with the NES with an all-time classic, Super Mario Bros. 3. It's just hard to oversell this game. Just everything from the cover art to the game itself is just completely spot on. So what better to start out the segment. Alright, so turned on the system. Here's the boot screen. Yeah, you're going to have to excuse the video footage of this segment just because it's really hard to capture CRTs properly. It always has been. So there's going to be some flickering. There's going to be, some vertical bars and, just general glare. So, yeah, just bear with me here. I apologize in advance. Alright, so here's the map screen. Such a great song for the first world. As you can see, the video quality is incredible. There's no blur, there's no color bleeding, it's just crystal sharp clarity we're seeing here. Obviously on the CRT itself, the color is about 100 times better than what you're seeing on this YouTube video. I know that because I'm looking at the viewfinder, and it's it's good but not as good, obviously. But yeah, it's just a great picture, and let's move on to the next console. Yeah, take it off. Let's go to the PC Engine. I only have one game for it, so bear with me. Alright, gonna run the game. It's Castlevania Rondo of Blood, the quintessential PC Engine CD game. It's a graphical showcase too, so it's nice that I chose this. Not that I had much of a choice. Classic Konami logo, back when they made video games. That's the cutscene. You can just skip that. Hopefully you can just see how sharp the text is and how great everything looks. I'll just get in some gameplay footage just so you can see the actual in-game models. But yeah, overall it's a great game. Very tough though. I have yet to beat it. So yeah, here's Richter. So yeah, as you can see, very sharp, no blur or anything like that. Just fantastic looking game. Looks even better with RGB. It's kind of a necessity in my opinion to go that route if you have a PC Engine. But yeah, we can move on to the next console, the Sega Saturn. It's gonna boot up to the Action Replay cartridge just because that's what I use to play import games, so I just always have it in there. But if you've seen some of my previous videos, you might be able to guess what the game is gonna be. It's a game I like to include in my videos as much as possible because I feel like it's criminally underplayed. But it's Nights into Dreams. Just a really great game. Sonic Team's best game in my opinion. Here you can just get a glimpse of the text and how sharp it is. Text is a very easy way to see right off the bat how clear your image is. If you're using composite or something, it'd be very blurry. But let's get into the actual game. Just want to show you guys a bit of it. Just to self-indulge a bit. They re-released this game on PC, 360, and PS3, but I feel like they kind of mucked up the graphics. They look a lot better on Saturn, in my opinion. They have a charm to it. Like I said, the vertical bars, or the horizontal bars, or whatever they are really, you know, screwing with the video here, but you're gonna have to use your imagination a bit. But it just looks great. You're gonna have to take my word for it. The colors really pop out. This is a very colorful game, a very happy game, so well, I want to keep playing, but have to move on. Alright, so now I'm gonna test the Sega Genesis, and the nice thing about the Genesis is that it doubles as a master system as well if you have the power base converter. Well, it also does Sega CD and 32X. I have a 32X, but I don't really have it hooked up just because, well, for one, it's the 32X, but also it uses its own power brick and it's huge. Well, okay, one sidebar. There are a lot of really, you know, technical and high-minded people in the retro gaming community. What I'd like to see personally is to make AC adapters that don't have the horrifyingly big power brick on the end of the cord, like with a Super Nintendo or a Genesis or, you know, older Sega systems. I would just love to have normal size cords. It would make life a lot easier. But anyway, let's get to testing the Genesis. Here we're gonna look at probably the most technically impressive Genesis game, Gunstar Heroes, made by our good old friends at Treasure. I actually called up or emailed Treasure not too long ago to see if they were alive, and they didn't respond, so that's not a good sign. Alright, but here's Gunstar Heroes. It's very notorious for using a lot of graphical tricks on the Genesis. And just having a lot of stuff on screen, which is pretty impressive at the time. But yeah, as you can see, very sharp. One thing about the Genesis is that it probably has the biggest gulf between composite cable quality and RGB. Because when I used to use composite, I went and thought for years that the Genesis wasn't even in the Super Nintendo's league in terms of graphics, but the problem was that the composite signal for the Genesis is just garbage, so it makes games look a lot worse than they really are. So RGB for Genesis is a must in my opinion. Once again, these bars are screwing up the video, but like I said, you're going to have to believe me when I say the colors really pop out. That's a nice 3D effect. Just looking at the Gunstar Heroes logo, very crisp. So yeah, let's move on to the next console, the beloved Super Nintendo. I'm using a mini here just because it has the best RGB quality. Well, it's not quite true, but they're not completely true, but we'll go with that. Alright, so here's Donkey Kong Country 3. I chose it because I love this opening. It's also underappreciated, even though it's nowhere near as good as 2. It's still worth playing. Yeah, it just looks great. Just look how sharp this was. This came out really late in the Super Nintendo's life cycle. You know, there are characters in the game who play N64. That goes to show, you know, how late it came out. I think it came out in '96. It's great music as well. It's like the other Donkey Kong Country games. And you also, when it comes to Donkey Kong Country games, you want to play it on a CRT or use a really nice upscaler if you use an HD TV, just because the way the SGI graphics worked and the renders of the characters and backgrounds were make it so that if you don't use an upscaler, and it'll really blow up the image, it'll look kind of nasty. So same with Super Mario RPG, you're going to want to use CRT or an upscaler for those. But yeah, we can finally move on to the last system, the N64, and here we're going to use Pokemon Snap as the guinea pig. A game I wanted to highlight just because I feel like it has the same appeal as Pokemon Go, but it's better in my opinion. Made by Hal. I'm just trying to draw up any sort of, you know, fervor for a sequel, so I'm just trying to spread the good word of Pokemon Snap, a game that sold well, but, you know, it didn't reach as many people as it probably should have. It's based on the accessibility of the game and overall fun. Pokemon logo, very sharp. It's kind of a recurring theme in this video. I think this was someone else's save file. I wouldn't name my character Gigan or whatever. Yes. I'm just going to show you a little bit of the first level. It's a very innocent game. It's Pidgey. It's such a good game. Doduo. Well, anyway, let's move on. You know, one thing I will say about the N64 is that the RGB quality, not very good in my opinion. I think that's just because of the way the N64 handled the graphics. It had this like smeary anti-aliasing on pretty much all the games, so unfortunately RGB doesn't really do much. I mean, when I got it I was pretty disappointed, and I don't even think it looks all that much better than composite. Now, I said it, but you can disagree with me there, but I wasn't impressed. Alright, so before I get my final thoughts on the G-SCART, I wanted to demonstrate one final thing. It's the priority sequence thing I was talking about earlier in my video. I moved the TV around a little bit so it's easier to see from this angle. So here's what I'm going to do. So here's the Saturn. It's on input number 4. And here's the Genesis, which is on input number 3. Alright, so I'm going to turn on the Saturn. As you can see, it plays it perfectly. Okay, but let's say without taking off the Saturn, I want to switch the Genesis. It starts it off. And displays it perfectly. Without any signal loss as far as I know. All right, so perfect. But let's say I want to switch to Super Nintendo without taking off the Genesis. The Super Nintendo is on input number 6. Okay, so I turn it on. You can see the LED light. Nothing. Still on Gunstar Heroes. So for whatever reason, it prioritizes the earlier input numbers. Again, I don't know exactly why that is. I'm sure there's a technical reason for that. But if I were to take off the Genesis, or turn off rather, and the Saturn, now it'll display the Super Nintendo input. So it's kind of an interesting quirk that the gscart has. I don't know if that's a common thing with automatic switchers, but like I said, just something I wanted to showcase. Alright, so now we're at the final segment. Should you buy a gscart SW? Before I get to that though, I just want to say that I'm going to include a link in the description as to how you can order a gscart SW if you want one. Unfortunately, it's sold out at the moment, but it's on perpetual pre-order, so once the pre-orders reach a certain number, they can make a batch and, you know, ship them out to everyone. So that's nice. So there's less uncertainty there. But oh yeah, I just wanted to say that the buying experience has been very good. I don't know if it's one person running gRetroStuff, but the vocal guy who assembles them and ships them out is a guy called Super G. He frequents the Assembler Games forums, which is how I found out about him. He has a thread going about the gscart, and by all accounts, he's just a great guy because he's very communicative. If there's a problem, like for example, during this production run, he said he accidentally ordered a set of screws that were slightly too big or too small. I can't remember. So he had to order some new ones, and it was a delay of a couple days. It's just nice to have someone who's honest and can really just, you know, go through the process of creating the device, especially for something this expensive. So, oh yeah, and also he's very receptive. He'll answer everyone's questions, even duplicate ones that, you know, people ask all the time, even though they can just, you know, go to a previous page and find the answer that way. So he's very patient, and he's not, you know, making this to gouge people or make a ton of money. As far as I know, he's barely making anything off these. He's just doing this for the community. So that's why, you know, even though it's a very expensive product, I didn't feel bad giving this guy my money at all. He just seems like a very stand-up guy. So feel good about that. So getting back to whether you should buy one. So when I originally ordered the gscart SW, there were no solutions around for as far as SCART switches go. You know, all the popular ones like from Band Ridge and Hama or whatever were sold out and seemingly weren't in production anymore. So there was pretty much no other option. So that's why I got this. You know, even though it was very pricey, you know, I could trust that it would be a very good product because it's made by, you know, very technically minded people or a person. I'm still not sure if gRetroStuff is one person or multiple. But, you know, it's made for the retro community. So that's why it has 8 SCART switches, which, you know, on a typical consumer level switch, you usually only have, let's say for an HDMI switch, you usually only have 5 at most. So that's why I really wanted this. I will say, though, that recently someone brought this to my attention that the Bandridge 5-input SCART selector has been put back in circulation on eBay, at least. It's sold by some guy or people in the Netherlands. Both the automatic variety and the manual switch type. So that kind of took the wind out of my sails a little bit. I have to say that, you know, even though I feel good about the gscart SW, initially I did feel a little bit of regret that I could have gotten a 5-input SCART selector for $90 roughly off eBay compared to the $225 plus shipping that the gscart cost. Like I said, I'm just being completely honest here. But I will say that, okay, this is kind of a stupid argument to make, but with everything being equal, if price wasn't a factor, the gscart SW, I mean, from what I understand, is the best SCART switch available. Obviously, I haven't tried the Band Ridge or the Hama or whatever, but video quality wise, the gscart is just unbelievable. Everything's there. There's no signal loss. The audio is great. It's plug and play. Everything just works flawlessly. It has two outputs, which is great because of the scenario I pointed out earlier. Having one output dedicated to a BVM or a PVM, and the other output dedicated to, let's say a FrameMeister. So it's very flexible in that regard. It has all those like C-Sync options, which I don't know if the Band Ridge one does. So with everything being equal, the gscart is probably the best, I'll say. I can't speak definitively on that, obviously, since I haven't tried the rest. But, at some point when you're in this hobby, you're spending a lot anyway. I mean, this is kind of a crutch argument that I'm maybe using to justify the purchase to myself. But, if you're spending this much money for this retro niche, obviously you want the best, right? So I don't know. I feel like it's a good purchase overall for me. Another thing that is pretty evident is that it has 8 SCART switches or SCART ports. So you don't have to daisy chain 2 Band Ridge boxes. You can just use one gscart. I think 8 will cover pretty much most people's needs. Like I showcased earlier, I have 6 right now, but I plan on getting a Neo Geo in the future, and then also possibly using a PlayStation as well, though right now I'm just using a PS2 with component to play PS1 games. But yeah, not much else to say. I can't speak definitively on whether you should buy one or not, because it really depends on the funds that you have. Because $250 roughly is a lot for a SCART switch. That's more than I paid for my BVM. So I can't spend your money for you or give advice on that kind of stuff. So it seems like a cop out, but all I can really tell you is that the gscart SW is amazing. What I think the thing I love most about having a SCART switch now, as opposed to having to manually change the SCART plug or the SCART connector every time I wanted to play a different system, is that everything is set up, everything's ready to go. There's one less barrier to playing my games, and I don't know if this is a secret or not, but when your systems are ready to go and can be played anytime, you're more likely to play them. So that alone is worth having a SCART switch, in my opinion. Even if you don't get a gscart, just having a switch in general is a very positive part of being a retro quote unquote gamer, for lack of a better term. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy with the gscart SW, and I think everyone who owns one is very happy. I mean, the people on the shmup forums and Assembler Games swear by it, so that's very heartening for me. So yeah, I feel like I'm rambling now. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it gave you all the information you needed to give you a decision, an educated decision on whether or not you should buy one. So yeah, thanks for watching the video, and talk to you guys later.